Hi, welcome to the Three Times podcast. Today I'm talking to singer-songwriter Paul Frear about the role of politics in grassroots music and how it continues to inspire him. Paul emerged from the 70s punk scene and his gigs became a mixture of lecture, debate, pop songs and audience participation. One of the driving forces behind the Alston Live Festival, he is an active supporter of the We Shall Overcome anti-austerity movement and the Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign. He performs as Uncle Paf, that's spelt P-A-F, and you can find his 2020 album The Miner and His Son on Spotify. We recorded the interview in January 2024 in Paul's kitchen at his home a few miles outside Alston, just as Storm Jocelyn arrived, which is why his central heating boiler has several walk-on parts during the interview.
Sing it for Orgreave, truth and justice, police and media lies. Sing it for all you miners, and I'll sing it for your wife. For your wife.
Paul, can you tell me how you became interested in music in the first place?
I think it's like probably a lot of teenage boys' angst, wanting to probably impress the girls and pick up the guitar. But
Yeah.
My elder sister, my parents were both into music, very eclectic types of music, and I can remember when my sister came back with Legend by Bob Marley, and I couldn't stop playing it. Basically, I think I took over playing that. So I've always had a good background of music, and then on the periphery we had that somewhat music revolution in '76 when punks came along, and you didn't have to be all that technical a musician to play. So there I was in my bedroom on my K guitar that I got from a catalogue, practicing my 3 chords so I could sing along to the Clash, and that's where it started.
All right. Yeah. And so, and how did you continue that? Did you play in bands at school or anything like that?
Yeah, the first band was a sixth form band, named after my dad's lawnmower. Electric 47 we were called.
That's a good name.
Yeah, we were Electric 47 for a while, and then we started making the names a bit more punky. Inflammable Material was a band I was in, and then we started to get a bit too clever musically, and we became QED for a while, and we recorded some music under the band QED, but then we got to kind of like going to university and starting work, and we all split up and went our separate ways. But I've always kept playing, and I used to live in York, and the underpass at the back of the station, I discovered the acoustics in there were just mind-blowingly good, the reverb, the natural reverb. And I used to busk a lot. I used to busk in York quite a lot. And then drifted in and out of different bands, but I became a solo artist probably after my first 2 kids just started to grow up a bit, and I got a bit more time. It was nice to develop music, and I remember the band days of late nights and hauling gear around, and I thought I didn't really enjoy that. So being a solo artist and a single guitar, there's nothing better. I know it's somewhat selfish, but it gives you so much freedom. You don't have to be regimentally getting everybody together to practice. It gives you the freedom. And that's when I do gigs now, I probably don't play the same song twice ever. I just improvise, break off, I have some discussions with the audience. If there's anybody heckling, we'll have a bit of chat. So it just gives you that freedom, and I love it. I love it.
You've got to have the bottle to stand up there on your own in the first place, haven't you?
Yeah, I suppose that comes with time, though, doesn't it? I don't ever really remember being overly nervous playing. I think you just get an energy, that adrenaline that you get from playing. I love it. Admittedly, I've never played in front of 10,000 people. That might be a bit intimidating for the first time, but some of the more interesting times have probably been with, right-wing hecklers and stuff like that. That can be quite tasty sometimes.
Yeah. So I imagine if you started with punk, that you always have a sort of what's the word? An advocacy approach when you're in your lyrics. You would be telling your audience what your politics were from the outset, or what you thought about things generally.
Oh yeah,
it's not a passive medium, is it?
No, it isn't. It's quite. Yeah, I am quite direct. I think I've got one or two subtle songs that you might have to get into the lyrics to kind of see where I'm coming from. But yeah, a lot of the music is it's out there. I'm telling a story a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Some are stories about my family, about my grandparents, and the rest are just about all the things around us,
Yeah. So how did you become involved with the miners' strike movement? Was that a kind of a retrospective thing? Was it involvement at the time?
That was quite raw, actually, because as we left school in 1980. All my friends, and I lived in a village south of Leeds, and we had 2 pits. Well, there was probably 5 pits within a few miles of each other, and it was a well-paid job, and it was relatively easy to go get a job at the pit. So I had a lot of friends who went to the pit. My 2 closest friends, one went to be the traditional coal-face miner, and the other one trained at college to become a pit deputy. So when the miners' strike came around, my friend Neil was the pit deputy. He was still working. He was keeping the pit from stopping from flooding and stuff like that. Whereas my friend Charlie, he was out in the thick of it. And I remember that Christmas of '84, and it was dire. It was dire, and that was just first-hand experience of seeing how, what straits they were in.
Yeah.
He lived in a pit village. We'd go to the pub, and that wasn't a celebratory time in the pub at Christmas, despite it being that time of year.
Yeah.
So I kind of I think I got ingrained with it from that point onwards, and then I've never been far away from it. And obviously with Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign, been to some of their events, played at some of their events, so never too far away. I like going to the big meeting as well. It's just nice. I don't go every year, but it's a great experience.
Yeah. Have you ever performed at any of these events?
Not at the big meeting, no. I've performed at the Unity Hall in Wakefield when they have. It's done under the banner of kind of it's not just the miners' strike, so you'll get people like Graham Harris, the photographer who took this picture of Leslie Bolton. He'll be there with all these black and white prints, and you can buy them.
Picture on your T-shirt of the Truth and Justice campaign.
Yeah, the famous picture of Leslie Bolton just about to get hit by a mounted policeman.
Yeah.
Look at what happened at Hillsborough and how long it took for the truth to come out at Hillsborough. Yeah. It's the same crowd. And they're just hiding behind it. I mean, pictures and video speak 1,000 words. We didn't have, when the miners' strike at Orgreave in particular, there's some absolutely amazing images. Report Digital, Graham Harris, check it out. I mean, it's got badged officers. You can see that they aren't just police constables. These are ranked officers with riot shields and batons beating miners on the floor and on the bonnets of cars. This is absolutely appalling. No recourse to that.
Met a guy at a festival, stopped me in my tracks. The t-shirt I was wearing, he said, "Christ, it takes me back." He looked at me with a tear in his eye as he began to cry. The 17-year-old striking miner of the day, his innocence died. His innocence died. Sing it for all grief, truth and justice, police and media lies. I'll sing it for all you miners, and I'll sing it for your wives, for your wives. Tenner in his pocket and 4 cans of beer. A coach down from Scotland to the Orgreave battlefield. Coach down from Scotland to the Orgreave battlefield. Sing it for Orgreave, truth and justice, police and media lies. Sing it for all you miners, and I'll sing it for your wives, for your wives. Image on my t-shirt is one you've all have seen. A charging mounted policeman bearing down on Leslie Bolton. Charging mounted policeman bearing down on Leslie Bolton. Sing it for Orgreave, truth and justice, police and media lies. Sing it for all you miners, and I'll sing it for your wives, for your wives. Met a guy at a festival, he stopped me in my tracks. The t-shirt I was wearing, he said, "Christ, that takes me back." Well, he looked at me with a tear in his eye as he began to cry. A 17-year-old striking miner, the day his innocence died. His innocence died. His innocence died. His innocence died. Truth and justice.
There's this persistent sense of injustice that goes back way before the miners' strike, I'm sure. When I was young and at school, we had a 3-day week, so there was a lot of unrest in that period.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there was in the 60s, but I was too young to remember. But there's been a sense of injustice, and I'm interested as to how you think that inspires people like you, grassroots musicians, to write the songs that you do.
I've often thought that question myself. I've asked my question that before, and I think it goes back to probably a child and being influenced. I was very close to my maternal granddad, and one of the things that he instilled in you was, be kind, treat people how you expect to be treated yourself. And I think once you start on that pathway, you suddenly think, well, why are you doing that? That's not really a kind thing to do to somebody. Why are you making that person unemployed or whatever? I think that's where it probably stems from. I think things like punk and hearing it by your favourite artists like Joe Strummer, there was some rhetoric in some of those lyrics, but he said it how it was. And I think, that's how I feel. That's how I feel. Mm-hmm. So I think it started at a very early age, but was reinforced quite quickly when I started playing.
Yeah. So it's just kind of an inbuilt sense of right and wrong.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And do you think that's what resonates with audiences? Because for all that you and I and people like Billy Bragg and Joe Strummer have been singing these songs for years and years, we haven't made a lot of difference. But there's always seems to be an appetite for the songs.
Yeah, that's true. I think in terms of making a difference, and if you're talking about my socialist politics, I mean, look how popular Jeremy Corbyn was when he was campaigning. Tens of thousands of people coming to listen to him talk, but the right-wing press would never have him as a prime minister, and that's what's probably stopping socialism in this country, is the right-wing press. So I think there are people out there, and I think attitudes do change. I'm quite encouraged at some of the gigs that I do, how young the audience sometimes are and how clued up they are and switched on to, socialist policies. They've got a sense of right and wrong and what seems unjust and unfair. So I think it's a very slow process, Maybe it takes 13 years of recession and a Tory government to focus a few minds, because don't get me started on the voting apathy of people in this country, because that's where it comes down to. But I think we can make change. It might be small changes and localised changes. Are we ever going to have huge sweeping changes? I think it's watch this space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I went to see Billy Bragg at the Glass House, formerly the Sage in Gateshead. And Billy's now in his early 60s, I think, and the audience were noticeably grey-haired. But I would have thought that after all this time of standing on his soapbox and taking all the flack that he has, that he would be a bit subdued. But he was as bold and brave as ever, and he was noticeably trying to inspire his audience to keep the faith. Really, I think he was conscious that there hadn't been a lot of change since he started in the late 70s, wasn't it?
Yeah. I saw him in Glasgow. He was supported the Beautiful South in Glasgow, and my girlfriend's a Beautiful South fan, and I'm a Billy Bragg fan. So let's go to this. Uh-huh. And I don't like big arenas. It was at the whatever arena in Glasgow, and I thought, regimental, and there's security on every flipping door and seat, and it's just like, that's not the gig that I go to. I get up close and personal. I mean, I'm obviously through my punk years. I'll still go see Stiff Little Fingers and try and mix it with the old gadgets at the front still. I still do that. And I like to be up close and personal, and I want to be there to get the set list when it's all finished.
Right.
And so I had to sneak in to watch Billy Bragg, because I didn't have a ticket to go stand at the front to watch him, so I managed to get myself down to the front, and I was mesmerised. But the chatter around me was very interesting, to the point where I heard people saying, "Who's this?"
Really?
And I was like, that's quite, I would have thought, even if you don't know, you couldn't see Beautiful South and you go, "Oh, Billy Bragg, I wonder who he is," but to actually turn up and go, "Who's Billy Bragg?" I was quite surprised at that.
I would be surprised at that. I mean, it's kind of an institution, isn't it?
I think
it's so. And he's been on television. And
exactly.
Radio. It's not as if he's, kept himself a secret.
So, but I got to see Billy, once a flood. There's similarities there. Yeah. I was once called after a gig, in a gig review, I was once called the Billy Bragg of Teesdale, which I thought was mildly amusing, because I don't live in Teesdale.
So you don't live in Teesdale. Were you performing in Teesdale? Is that what it was?
No, I was actually performing in Rydale, of all places.
Oh, right. Well, they probably think...
Anti-fracking gig, I think that was, if I remember right.
So, are you aware of any performers who younger people would be familiar with, who are doing the same as Billy Bragg has done?
You see, because of the types of gigs that I do, I come across, socialist musicians, political musicians all the time. It's the kind of field I move in. So you've got the Jess Silks of this world, Grace Petrie, Joe Solo, Callum Bird. I come across them quite a bit.
Yeah.
I've also done gigs in Newcastle with Attila stockbroker. Just look for the Brighton fixtures and then follow her to the next city and do a gig. David Rovix from America, very influential. I absolutely love David Rovix's songs. I mean, some of his songs are really hard hitting, really very clever lyricist.
Pop has pretty much always been the same, hasn't it? It's always been melodic, take it or leave it, here today, gone tomorrow kind of stuff. And you go back to the 60s, stuff that we now think of as classic was actually very much of the same genre as Justin Bieber or a lot of these people. But there are some artists these days that are very popular out on a global scale that do talk about politics, but not the sort of protest style of politics that we've been talking about, more about political issues such as the environment or gender politics or whatever. So there is this social concern that's still prevalent. So we know, we might want to say, well, this is about love or not love or something, or love going wrong. But actually, with a modern perspective, it's about gender politics, and we can recognise it as such now. So I think there is an awareness, but it's a different kind of politics in that it's not so quite upfront and in your face.
I think what also, you probably know firsthand how weaselly the music industry is, and obviously they're looking for commerciality, they're looking for a quick buck, and I think artists have to be quite careful when they first set out. I don't waver from my pop and politics. I will never be commercial. But if you want to get on and make a career out of it and make money from it, then you basically toe in the music line. And it's only when you become established that you can then say you've got then a bit of clout, and then you can start calling the shots a bit to the music industry, and you can start introducing your politics that were probably there all along, but you just weren't allowed to demonstrate them.
Miles and miles of razor wire tearing me apart. Miles and miles of razor wire breaking those mothers' hearts. Leave your home, why do you, in your only pair of shoes? Cry as you leave your family, tears as you leave your land. World dissolves through this war, destruction out of hand. The place the time's wanting, destruction of your land. Miles and miles of razor wire tearing me apart. Miles and miles of razor wire breaking those mothers' hearts. Borders become prison camps, police become your guards. Pepper spraying children, welcome one and all. Pepper spraying children, you're welcome one and all. Miles and miles of razor wire tearing me apart. Miles and miles of razor wire breaking those mothers' hearts. An apple for a child, doesn't take that much, you know, to show we really care. Got miles and miles of razor wire tearing me apart. Miles and miles of razor wire breaking those mothers' hearts. What is fail is failing, a helping hand too far. I don't pray to any God, but I hope he prays for you. I don't pray to any God, but I hope he prays for you. I don't pray for any God, I hope he prays for you. I don't pray for any God, but I hope he prays for you.
It seems to me that the kind of music you make and the way you perform is kind because you involve the audience in your gigs. It's kind of like the old way of people making music together, and I say the old way because I can remember that my mum, who grew up, who was a young woman in the war, saying that in their day, making music meant going down to the pub and having a sing-song. Someone would be on the piano, you'd sit there with half a beer, and you'd have a good sing-song, and that was how people made music. They didn't, by and large, go and see artists perform. So I'm wondering if this delivering a political message through your music is best done in the way that you do it, or whether it's amenable to other formats, because if you want to communicate a message to people, you need to involve them in it, don't you?
Yes, it's true. And how do I do that? I don't actively do it. I think I don't do every gig I'm asked to do, but I look at the opportunities from those gigs. I mean, even just for example, we have a really good live Sunday music session at the Turks in Alston, which you'll have to come along to. And there's some very good technical traditional musicians there who come a million miles away from my background, but they'll happily join in and play some of my songs. And that kind of like pushes the boundaries out a bit. And they've said to me before, they quite enjoy it when I go along, because I'm kind of just, it's a bit gnarly and it's a bit different than playing Paper Roses or Tie a Yellow Ribbon kind of thing.
They don't do that, do they?
No, they don't. No, they don't.
So how do you go about assessing an audience? And if you turned up to a gig and you think, well, this is, I expect this to go a certain way, how do you suss out the audience?
You don't till you start playing, see what the feedback is. And if people stand up and walk out, it's either because they don't like your music, they don't like what you're saying. It's encouraging when people come in. I did the graveyard shift at Wild on the Wall Festival last year. I mean, it was dreadful weather, so it wasn't a great turnout anyway, but I was on the main stage, kicking off first thing, 1 o'clock Sunday. So there's a few bleary-eyed people sat on bales. Yeah. But obviously Googled me and looked me up and turned up and listened and engaged. And, I got great feedback afterwards saying, great, you're saying it how it is. More people should be doing that. Yeah. And if one person came out of that tent and had suddenly pricked their conscience about maybe we are going in the wrong direction, then I wouldn't say job's done, but I'm encouraged by that.
Yeah, have you had anybody come up to you and say, I disagree with what you said, and
oh yeah,
correct, X, Y, Z reasons?
Yeah. I've been, one of my most popular songs, which is on my first album, which is We're Still the Enemy Within. That was the Brian Walden interview with Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
around the time of the miners' strike. And she wasn't just referring to the miners at the time. She was referring to. She basically said, "Oh, if you're a student and you're unionised, or you're a staunch unionist," she called us the enemy within.
Yeah.
And that's what that song's about. And there's a reference to Thatcher in there about how she basically, the Tory government basically wanted to weaken the unions to the point of submission so they could introduce loads of different work time regulations. And it just so happens that the landlady of the Turks, I'm not sure if she's a professor, certainly a doctor, Dr. Mearns, the first time I played that, she put me right on the political reference to Thatcher, because her PhD was basically working politics between 79 and 97, so the Thatcher years basically, and she'd interviewed people like Tebbit, and it's a great read. I've read it. I actually badged and we got talking, and really good friends, and I've read a PhD, and it's about that. It's how partly technology, computerization, started to reduce the need for bodies on a production line, perhaps, and the change in union laws.
Are we still the enemy within?
This, I'm afraid, has become almost a standard tactic.
Are we still the enemy within?
We must watch out for it.
Are we still the enemy within?
They are the enemies of democracy.
Are we still the enemy within?
I will never negotiate.
You can take the piss, you can kick me, even when I'm down. I'll never forget your face, copper, if you're ever in this town. Upturned panda cars, a battle not destined to win. Are we still the enemy within? 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 Break the unions and close the pits, a decision made long ago. It's not to do with what is left, there's 3 billion tons of coal. Secret talks behind closed doors, McGregor's fatuous grin. Still the enemy within. Are we still the enemy within? Are we still the enemy within? Are we still the enemy within? Thatcher, yes Thatcher, they nearly brought you down. You bought off knackots and you bust the miners' arms. One more union was all it would take as they fought for kith and kin. Are we still the enemy within? 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 Thatcher's funeral in gold though. Southern media, why you look so surprised? Hate runs deep for many years. Hate for media lies. Brother against brother, that was just the government spin. Are we still the enemy within? 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 Unions of today, the shadow of their former times, emasculated easy pickings, battered by their lies. So think back, if you don't stand firm, you'll drown in government spin. Still the enemy within. Are we still the enemy within? Are we still the enemy within? Are we still the enemy within? Still the enemy within. Still the enemy within. Still the enemy within. Still the enemy within. Are we still the enemy within? 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 Are we still the enemy?
So yeah, so I do get challenged, and I like being challenged, and I also like to talk about it. I mean, going back to the miners' strike, it's surprising at how many gigs I've done afterwards. It's happened to me 3 times now. Policemen who were at the miners' strike. In fact, the miner and his son is referenced to a policeman.
All right.
And the story with that one is, we were chatting in the pub, it was the Turks actually, came up to me and playing a few songs, and he said, I'll tell you an interesting story. He says, my dad was a miner, and he says, whatever you do, son, you're not going down the pit. He was absolutely said, it's not for you.
Yeah.
Go out and get a better job. So he became a policeman. And of course, what came round then, a few years later,
Was he on the other side?
he was on the other side to his dad.
Uh-huh.
And I'd never really thought about that dynamic before. And I came home, and it's one of those songs that took 3 minutes to write. It was just so there. So yeah, it's interesting where that kind of inspiration comes from. And the other time, I was doing a gig in, I think it was for Hetton Colliery. The picture on the back of the second album is the memorial to the Hetton Colliery disaster. I was doing a gig there to fundraise to get that statue built, and there was a retired Met Copper in the audience, and he came and spoke to me, and he said, I was at Orgreave. And I went, right.
Oh, yeah.
So we spent a good hour chatting about that, and I said, go on, tell me. He said, yeah, we shouldn't behave like we did. And I said, I bet you wouldn't stand up in court and say that, would you? And he went, no. But yeah, so yeah, he was kind of, I wouldn't say full of remorse, but he knew it was heavy-handed and over the top. And you only have to see the film.
Yeah. Do you think that people will be protesting in maybe 3 or 4 years' time as we are now? That same anger and frustration?
Look where protests first started. Look at the pamphleteers. Look at the levellers. The diggers. I think it's ingrained in the British psyche to queue and complain. So I think we will. I think the problem is, and hopefully we do get a change of government. Whether that will bring about real socialist change, I'll reserve judgment on that. But it won't take long. If things don't change quickly, it won't take long for the right-wing press to stick the boot in.
Yeah.
And you could have the Tories back in power in another 4 years if that's the case.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But I'm encouraged at the fact that I see people in their 20s now singing the same kind of music that I do.
Yeah.
And I thought that's good. I think it's inherent, it's ingrained, and if you're of that want, then you will keep doing it. And long may it continue. Long may we question people and be open about it.
Yeah. I'm a bit worried that it will be the protest songs, as opposed to the more general political issues that I was talking about, environmentalism, gender politics and so on. But the protest songs will be consigned to a niche. That's kind of in the way that folk music has been sidelined since its heyday in the early 60s. It's been sort of pushed further and further into its own niche, hasn't it? Which is away from the mainstream now, by and large. So I'd be a bit worried that protest songs were not still being performed at grassroots level. I'm not really worried about level of national media, because I don't think that's going to happen ever. But it would be a sad day, I think, if when you went to a festival there wasn't somebody like you standing up there singing "Let's Hear It for the Workers."
Yeah, I can't see that day coming.
No.
I think we'll always be there, and it might not be just somebody with a guitar, you know, an individual person such as me doing it. I think there'll be some young bands out there doing it, and maybe appealing to a different demographic.
Yeah.
They do come along from time to time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think probably when you're younger, you probably maybe do search for that commercial success, and I think that will dampen.
Yeah.
But there may be bands out there that they don't care about that, and they're very good.
Yeah. That's an interesting point, because traditionally younger people, as in the 60s it was the students, were very passionate about politics. And you make the point there that younger people might be more interested in commercial success, and it's older people like us who are talking about politics. So do you think that that younger people will become politicised? Do you think there's any opportunity for that, or are we just too thinly spread these days?
I'm still really encouraged. I mean, a band that I discovered a couple of years ago, bunch of lads from Sheffield, Shanghai Trees, and I think they call themselves cloth cap banjo punks. Absolute full on socialists. The songs are powerful and meaningful and questioning, you know, and they're doing well. They're doing well with their own DIY commercialism. They're not a slave to a record, the music industry, and they're promoting themselves well and doing okay. So yeah, I think there's still. It takes. I go back to this word apathy. The apathy in the general. I'll be careful what I say here, Radio 1 and Radio 2 listeners. If something gets played that's just slightly on the edge, I mean, Billy Bragg did it successfully when they had the pop charts, and he managed to knock out those take down the Union Jack, didn't he?
Yeah.
And he bust the system by releasing it on 3 separate discs. You could buy for almost the same money. You could buy three for one. That got him on top of the pops.
Yeah.
Did it make a difference? No, but it was a kind of one in the eye thing for the kind of the Weasley music industry. And I think that aside, people will continue. I'm encouraged that my 2 youngest kids are, you know, browbeaten by their father at all, but they're politically aware, and they have their own politics. And I will get messages from my son saying, "Oh, just seen this band in Sheffield. You want to check them out?" So he's already making his own way through, and they're out there. So I'm kind of encouraged.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be left to us old edges.
Yeah. No, but let's hope not. The 3 songs we played today were Are We Still the Enemy Within, from the album A Different Kind of War, and from the album The Miner and His Son, T-Shirt and Miles and Miles. Thanks for listening to the 3 Times podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and tell your friends about us.